Snow drifted gently through the gray afternoon as Julie Harper wandered the city streets, boots crunching on the thin layer of white that had settled over the sidewalks like a shroud. Her blonde hair, damp with melting flakes, clung to her cheeks. She did not seem to notice. Her eyes were dull, unfocused, staring ahead at nothing in particular. Her purse sagged from one shoulder, arms hanging loose at her sides as if the weight of the day had pulled all the strength from her limbs. People bustled past her, laughing, talking, moving toward purpose with their heads bent against the cold. Couples hurried toward warm restaurants. Colleagues debated weekend plans. Children tugged their parents toward brightly lit shop windows. Julie moved toward nothing. She had nowhere to be now. No desk to return to tomorrow morning. No phone to answer or appointments to schedule. She stopped beside a snow-dusted bench outside a closed cafe and slowly sat down, her breath curling white into the frigid air. The metal was cold through her coat, but she barely felt it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She stared at her gloved hands in her lap, lost in the crushing weight of everything that had gone wrong. That morning, she still had a job. She had arrived 23 minutes late to the reception desk at Morrison & Associates, not because she had overslept or forgotten to set her alarm. She had been up since dawn, giving her mother the morning insulin injection, heating soup because solid food made her nauseous, waiting for the home health nurse who never came. Again, she had rushed out the door with a guilty heart and trembling hands, knowing what awaited her. Mr. Thomason had been waiting by her desk, his arms crossed, his expression grim. His thinning hair was combed precisely over his scalp, his tie knotted with military precision. He had the look of a man who took pride in following rules, no matter the human cost. "Julie, we need reliability," he had said, his voice clipped and final. "This is the third time this month." "I had to care for my mom," Julie had stammered, pulling off her coat with shaking fingers. "She collapsed yesterday evening. The nurse didn't show up this morning. I'm sorry. I really am." "I'm sorry, too," he had said, though he clearly wasn't. His eyes held no warmth, no understanding. "But this is a business. We have clients who expect professional service. Your personal situation, while unfortunate, cannot continue to interfere with your duties." And that was it. 10 minutes later, she was back on the street with a cardboard box containing her coffee mug, a small succulent plant, and a framed photo of her and her mother from last Christmas. Her mother's face in the picture was thin but smiling, her eyes bright despite the illness that was slowly stealing her away. Now Julie sat adrift in the cold, clutching that same photo through the cardboard. "I'm trying," she whispered to no one, her voice barely audible above the whisper of falling snow. "I'm trying so hard." Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from her mother. "How was work today, sweetheart? Did you remember to eat lunch?" Julie's throat tightened. How could she explain this? Her mother worried about everything already. The medical bills, the insulin costs, the way Julie had given up her journalism scholarship to stay home and care for her. How could she add unemployment to that burden? She typed back, "Work was fine. I'll be home soon. Love you." The man stood carefully helping his daughter to her feet and adjusting her thin coat. "I'm Matt," he said, his voice rough with cold and emotion. "We won't stay long. Just tonight." Julie nodded, already turning to lead them through the snow toward her apartment building. Her chest still ached, with the weight of losing her job, with the worry about her mother, with the uncertainty of what tomorrow would bring. But somewhere beneath all that weight, something warm flickered to life. Hope, she realized. For the first time in months, she felt genuinely useful, genuinely needed. Not because she could fix something or manage someone's schedule, but because she had simply chosen to be kind. Julie's apartment was small but warm, filled with the comforting scent of garlic and thyme from the vegetable soup she had made that morning, back when she still had hope for the day. The walls were lined with books, journalism texts from her abandoned college dreams, mysteries from the library, and photo albums chronicling the quiet life she and her mother had built together. A small collection of houseplants crowded the windowsill, their green leaves pressing against the glass as if trying to catch every last bit of winter light. Matt helped Diane out of her damp coat and shoes, revealing socks that were mismatched and worn thin at the heels. Julie noticed immediately and disappeared into her bedroom, returning with a dry pair from her drawer, thick wool socks with tiny snowflakes on them. "Thank you," Matt said softly as Julie knelt to help Diane with the socks. His voice carried a weight of gratitude that seemed too large for such a simple gesture. Julie nodded and motioned toward the small couch, which was covered with a quilt her mother had made years ago. "You can rest here while I warm the soup." While she moved through the narrow kitchen, reheating the pot on her small stove, Matt glanced around the modest space. Everything was clean and carefully maintained, clearly cared for despite its obvious age. The furniture was secondhand but arranged with an eye for comfort. Family photos covered one wall. Julie with an older woman who shared her blonde hair and gentle smile, both of them laughing at some long-forgotten joke. Matt noticed a loose cabinet door hanging slightly askew and, after a moment's hesitation, crouched down to examine the hinge. He gently adjusted the mechanism until it stopped squeaking and hung properly. Julie looked over from the stove. "You didn't have to do that." Matt gave a faint smile, his hand still working to tighten a loose screw. "Old habit. Fixing things keeps my hands busy when my mind won't settle." She raised an eyebrow but let it go, stirring the soup and adding a pinch more salt. There was something practiced about the way he worked, she noticed. Not the fumbling attempts of someone who occasionally tried to fix things, but the confident movements of someone who understood how things fit together. Diane, now wearing one of Julie's oversized sweaters that hung to her knees, tiptoed into the kitchen. "It smells like a restaurant," the little girl said shyly, her voice careful and polite in the way of children who had learned to be grateful for small kindnesses. Julie smiled, the expression feeling more natural now. "It's just vegetable and barley, but thank you, sweetheart." Diane giggled, a sound like silver bells that seemed to brighten the entire apartment, and returned to the living room, where she settled cross-legged on the rug and began examining Julie's collection of books with intense curiosity. Julie set 3 bowls at her small dining table and ladled the soup, adding a slice of homemade bread to each bowl. The bread was from yesterday, when she had still believed her biggest worry was whether the home health aide would remember to check her mother's blood sugar. They sat down to eat, Diane swinging her legs from the chair and taking careful spoonfuls. She ate quietly, watching the adults with large, curious eyes that missed nothing. Matt took a spoonful and nodded appreciatively. "This is really good," he said, and Julie could tell he meant it. "Cooking's cheaper than therapy," Julie replied with a small smile, then immediately wondered if the joke was appropriate. But Matt chuckled under his breath, a warm sound that suggested he understood exactly what she meant. After a pause, Julie found herself asking, "So what do you do for work?" Matt stirred his soup slowly, his eyes focused on the bowl rather than meeting her gaze. "I took some time off," he said finally. "We've been figuring things out." She didn't press. She recognized that weight in a voice, the careful way people talked around the edges of pain they weren't ready to share. Instead, she offered something of her own. "I was supposed to go to Columbia," she said, surprising herself with the admission. "Full ride for journalism. Then Mom got sick, and I stayed home. Worked the front desk at a law firm." She paused, then added quietly, "Until today." Matt looked up at her then, and she saw something almost like admiration in his tired eyes. "That's not nothing," he said firmly. "You chose someone else over yourself." "Not everyone would make that choice." Julie blinked, taken aback. It had been so long since someone had framed her sacrifice as anything other than a waste, a missed opportunity, a reason to feel pity. Her former classmates had moved on to internships and bylines while she learned to give insulin injections and navigate insurance claims. But the way Matt said it made it sound almost noble. "What about you?" she asked gently, "before the time off?" Matt was quiet for a long moment, his spoon tracing patterns in his soup. "I lost someone," he said finally. "After that, I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be anymore." Julie nodded, understanding flooding through her. "Yeah," she said softly, "I get that." After dinner, Diane asked if she could draw, her voice hopeful and tentative. Julie disappeared into a closet and returned with a box of art supplies, colored pencils, markers, construction paper left over from a volunteer project at her mother's clinic. The girl's eyes lit up as she settled on the living room rug, humming softly to herself as she began to work. Matt stood to gather the dishes, but Julie tried to wave him off. "You don't need to." "I want to," he said simply. and something in his tone told her not to argue. While he washed dishes in her small sink, she noticed him quietly fixing other small problems, tightening the loose faucet handle, adjusting a drawer that had been sticking for months. His movements were efficient, practiced, like someone who had spent years learning to notice what needed attention. "Do you always fix things?" Julie asked, leaning against the counter and watching him work. Matt gave a dry smile, not looking up from the dish he was rinsing. "Only when I can't fix the big stuff." Julie laughed, a real laugh, bright and unexpected. It startled her, the sound seeming to echo in the small space. She couldn't remember the last time she had laughed like that, spontaneous and genuine. It felt good, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. Later, when the dishes were done and Matt had somehow managed to fix 3 other small problems around the apartment, Julie returned to the living room to find Diane holding something small and delicate in her cupped hands. "I made this," the little girl said, holding it out with careful pride. It was a bracelet, made from thin green wire that looked like it had come from the craft supplies, twisted carefully around 2 plastic beads. The craftsmanship was uneven, clearly the work of small fingers, but shaped with such deliberate care that it took Julie's breath away. "For me?" Julie asked, kneeling down to Diane's level. Diane nodded solemnly. "You're the first person who smiled at me today." Julie's chest tightened with emotion so sudden and overwhelming that she had to press her lips together to keep from crying. She pulled the little girl into a hug, holding her close as tears slid silently down her face. The small body was warm and solid in her arms, smelling faintly of the borrowed sweater and the lingering cold from outside. For the first time in what felt like years, Julie felt genuinely needed, not because someone required her to manage their schedule or fix their problems, but because she had simply chosen to be kind to another human being. The feeling was so pure, so uncomplicated, that it cut through all the worry and fear that had been weighing her down. Matt watched from the couch, and when their eyes met over Diane's head, he gave her a smile that was small, but completely honest. There was understanding in that look, and gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name but that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. That night, after Diane had fallen asleep under a borrowed quilt, curled up on the couch with her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, Julie sat quietly in her bedroom, turning the wire bracelet over in her hands. It was crooked and awkward, clearly homemade, the beads slightly uneven where they had been threaded onto the wire. It was probably the ugliest piece of jewelry she had ever seen, and it was definitely the most beautiful gift she had ever received. She slipped it onto her wrist, where it caught the light from her bedside lamp, the green wire gleaming softly against her skin. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without worrying about tomorrow. The apartment was unusually quiet the next morning. No soft humming from the kitchen, no tiny footsteps padding across the worn wooden floor, no gentle murmur of conversation. Julie stirred in bed, the sun already spilling pale morning light through her thin curtains. She stretched slowly, blinking sleep from her eyes, expecting to hear some sign of her guests. Perhaps Diane's whispered questions or Matt's low voice offering thanks again for their unexpected refuge. But there was only silence. She sat up abruptly, her heart suddenly racing, and looked toward the living room through her open bedroom door. The blankets on the couch were neatly folded, the borrowed quilt smoothed and placed precisely where it had been the day before. The little sweater Diane had worn was draped carefully over the back of a chair. Even the art supplies had been returned to their box and placed back on the shelf. Julie swung her legs out of bed, her bare feet hitting the cold floor, and hurried to the living room, empty. The kitchen was spotless, cleaner than she had left it, actually. Matt had apparently washed not just the dishes from their late evening snack, but every dish in her sink, wiped down the counters, and even cleaned the inside of her microwave. On the small dining table sat a single piece of construction paper, folded carefully in half. Julie's name was written across the front in careful, childish letters decorated with tiny flowers drawn in purple marker. Inside, Diane had drawn a picture. 3 stick figures standing in front of what was unmistakably Julie's apartment building, recognizable by the red fire escape she had pointed out the night before. The tallest figure had yellow yarn-like hair and was wearing a green bracelet. The middle figure was clearly Matt, drawn with careful attention to his kind eyes. and the smallest figure was Diane herself, holding the hand of the yellow-haired woman. Below the drawing, in Matt's neat handwriting, were just a few words. "Thank you for giving us hope. We won't forget your kindness. Visa commandee." Julie sank into one of her dining chairs, the paper trembling slightly in her hands. She studied every detail of the drawing. The careful way Diane had drawn all three of them smiling, the little hearts floating above their heads, the sun shining brightly in the corner of the page despite the snow that had been falling when they met. They had left while she was still sleeping, probably early, not wanting to disturb her or impose any longer than necessary. She understood the impulse. She had felt that same careful politeness around people whose kindness she needed, but couldn't repay. But understanding it didn't make the empty apartment feel any less hollow. Julie touched the green wire bracelet on her wrist, turning it slowly. She had fallen asleep wearing it and had forgotten it was there until this moment. Now it felt precious, like a tangible connection to something that had mattered, even if it was over. She made coffee and sat at her small table, Diane's drawing propped against the sugar bowl where she could see it. The apartment felt different now, not just empty but aware of its own emptiness in a way it hadn't been before. She had lived alone for 2 years, since her mother's diabetes had worsened enough to require full-time care, and they had reluctantly agreed she should move to the assisted living facility. Julie had grown accustomed to the quiet, had even treasured it sometimes after long days of managing other people's needs and crises. But this morning the silence felt heavy. She kept expecting to hear Diane's laugh or see Matt emerge from the bathroom, hair still damp from a shower, ready to quietly fix whatever small problem he had noticed the night before. Her phone rang, startling her from her reverie. Her mother's name appeared on the screen. "Hi, Mom." "Good morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling today?" Her mother's voice was warm but carried that underlying note of concern that had become constant since her diagnosis. She worried about Julie almost as much as Julie worried about her. "I'm okay." Julie found herself smiling despite the melancholy. "Actually, I had an interesting night. I helped some people who needed a place to stay." There was a pause. "Oh, that was kind of you. Were they safe?" "You have to be careful, Julie." "They were very safe. A father and his little daughter. They were just having a hard time." Julie traced one of the flowers on Diane's drawing with her finger. "The little girl made me a bracelet." "That sounds lovely." Her mother's voice softened. "You know, your father always said that helping people when you least expect to was when it mattered most. Not when you have plenty to give, but when you're struggling yourself." Julie felt tears prick at her eyes. She hadn't told her mother about losing her job yet. Somehow, in the warmth of last night's unexpected companionship, she had almost forgotten about the disaster at Morrison & Associates, the weight of unemployment, the fear about bills and medical costs. "Mom, I need to tell you something." "Oh, before I forget," her mother interrupted. "The nurse said someone from your work called here yesterday looking for you." "Something about paperwork?" "I told them you'd call them back." Julie frowned. "Someone from Morrison called you?" "That's what the nurse said. I was having my afternoon rest, so I didn't take the call myself, but they left a message saying it was important." Julie's stomach tightened. Had Mr. Thomason realized he had made a mistake? Or was this about final paperwork, insurance forms, some bureaucratic loose end that needed tying up? She wasn't sure she was ready to deal with any of it yet. "I'll call them," she said finally. After she hung up, Julie sat for a long time, staring at Diane's drawing and thinking about the strange intersection of kindness and timing. Yesterday morning she had been Julie Harper, struggling receptionist with a sick mother and a precarious hold on stability. By evening, she had been someone who could offer shelter, someone whose small act of compassion had meant enough to inspire a child's artwork. This morning, she was unemployed again, but somehow the prospect didn't fill her with the same despair it had yesterday. Something had shifted during those few hours with Matt and Diane. She had been reminded that her value wasn't just in what she could do for employers or how efficiently she could manage other people's schedules. Sometimes it was enough to simply see someone who needed help and choose to provide it. She looked at her phone, considering whether to call Morrison & Associates back immediately or wait until she felt more prepared for whatever they needed to discuss. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Ms. Harper, this is Matthew Chen. Diane and I wanted to thank you again for your incredible kindness last night. I hope we can repay the favor someday. If you're ever in need of anything, please don't hesitate to reach out." Below the message was a phone number and an address. Not a street address, but what looked like a business address downtown. Julie stared at the text, her heart beating faster. Matthew Chen. She had never asked for his last name, had never thought to exchange contact information. In the gentle intimacy of sharing soup and stories, such practical details had seemed unnecessary. But now she had a way to reach them, to know that last night hadn't been completely ephemeral. She typed back, "Thank you for the beautiful drawing and for fixing half my apartment. Take care of yourselves." The response came quickly. "Would you like to have coffee sometime? I'd love to properly thank you, and Diane has been asking about the lady with the soup." Julie found herself smiling as she typed, "I'd like that very much." As she sent the message, Julie caught sight of herself in the hall mirror. She was still wearing yesterday's clothes, her hair was messy from sleep, and she had no job to go to. But she was wearing a crooked green bracelet made by a 5-year-old, and for the first time in months, she was looking forward to tomorrow. Whatever happened with work, whatever challenges lay ahead with her mother's care, whatever uncertainties dominated her practical life, she had this, the knowledge that she had made a difference to 2 people who needed one, and they had made a difference to her in return. It was, she thought, a pretty good place to start rebuilding from. Julie spent 3 days crafting the perfect response to Matt's coffee invitation, typing and deleting messages until her phone battery died twice. She settled on suggesting they meet at Cornerstone Cafe, a small place near her apartment where the barista knew her order, and the atmosphere was warm enough for a 5-year-old but quiet enough for adult conversation. When she arrived 15 minutes early, her palms were damp despite the cool spring air. She had changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple blue sweater and jeans. Casual enough not to seem like she was trying too hard, nice enough to show she cared about the. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Meeting. The green wire bracelet caught on her sweater cuff as she checked her reflection in the cafe window, and she smiled at the sight of it. Matt arrived precisely on time, holding Diane's hand as they approached the entrance. Julie waved from her corner table, and Diane broke into a grin that could have powered the entire cafe. The little girl ran ahead and threw her arms around Julie's waist before her father could stop her. "Julie, did you like my picture? Daddy said you might want to see us again." "I loved your picture," Julie said, kneeling to meet Diane's eyes. "It's hanging on my refrigerator right now." Matt approached more cautiously, but his smile was genuine. In daylight, Julie could see details she had missed that snowy night. The small scar above his left eyebrow, the way he unconsciously straightened Diane's jacket, the quiet confidence in how he moved through the world. He was wearing dark jeans and a navy button-down that looked expensive, though not flashy. "Thank you for meeting us," he said as they settled into chairs around the small table. "I wasn't sure you'd want to see us again." "Are you kidding? I've been looking forward to this all week." They ordered coffee for the adults, hot chocolate with extra marshmallows for Diane, and fell into easy conversation. Matt asked about her job search, and Julie found herself being more honest than she had intended. "I'm not sure I want another reception job," she admitted, stirring cream into her coffee. "I mean, I need the income, but sitting behind a desk scheduling other people's lives, I used to have bigger dreams." "What kind of dreams?" Matt asked, and something in his tone made her look up. He was listening with the kind of focused attention that made her feel like her answer actually mattered. "Journalism. Investigative reporting, specifically. I wanted to tell stories that made a difference, shine light on problems people couldn't solve themselves." She laughed self-consciously. "Sounds naive now." "It doesn't sound naive at all," Matt said firmly. "It sounds like someone who wants to help people. That's rare." Diane, who had been contentedly drawing on napkins with crayons the cafe kept for children, looked up suddenly. "Daddy helps people too. He makes buildings better when they're broken." Matt's cheeks reddened slightly. "Diane, we talked about—" "But you do. You made Mrs. Chen's store not leak anymore, and you fixed the playground at my old school so the swings wouldn't squeak." Julie raised an eyebrow. "Construction work?" "Something like that," Matt said, clearly uncomfortable with the attention. "I've always been good with my hands. It's satisfying work, taking something that's broken and making it whole again." There was something in the way he said it, a careful neutrality that reminded Julie of her own deflections when people asked about her abandoned education. She decided not to push. They talked for 2 hours. Diane colored and occasionally interjected with observations that made the adults laugh, commenting on other cafe patrons, asking Julie if she had any pets. She didn't, but she wanted a cat. Wondering if Julie's apartment had gotten lonely without them. Matt seemed to relax as the conversation continued, sharing stories about places he and Diane had traveled, always vaguely, never with specific details about timing or purpose. When Diane announced she needed to use the bathroom, Matt walked her over, leaving Julie alone at the table. She pulled out her phone to check the time and saw a missed call from Morrison and Associates. Her stomach clenched. She had been putting off returning their call, not ready to face whatever bureaucratic aftermath came with being fired. "Everything okay?" Matt asked as he and Diane returned. "Just work stuff. My old job keeps calling, probably about paperwork or something." Matt frowned. "Morrison and Associates?" Julie blinked, surprised. "You know them?" Yeah, I know of them." Matt's expression was hard to read. "They're a good firm. Reputation for being fair to their employees." "Tell that to my former boss," Julie muttered, then caught herself. "Sorry, I don't mean to be bitter. Mr. Thomason probably had his reasons for letting me go." "Thomason?" Matt's voice was sharp now, and Julie looked at him in surprise. "Richard Thomason. He runs the front office operations. Do you know him?" Matt was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working like he was choosing his words carefully. "I know him," he said finally, "and I know he made a mistake." Before Julie could ask what he meant, Diane tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we show Julie the surprise now?" Matt looked between his daughter and Julie, seeming to come to some internal decision. "Actually, yes. Julie, would you mind taking a short walk with us? There's something I'd like to show you." Julie agreed, curious about the sudden tension she sensed in Matt. They walked 3 blocks through the downtown area, past boutiques and office buildings, until they stopped in front of a gleaming glass tower that stretched 30 stories into the sky. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with a security desk and turnstiles that required key cards. "Morrison and Associates is on the 15th floor of this building," Matt said quietly. Julie stared up at the impressive facade. "How did you know that?" Matt took a deep breath. "Because I'm starting work here on Monday. The company that's been calling you, they want to offer you your job back, with a promotion." Julie felt the world tilt slightly. "What are you talking about? How could you possibly know that?" "Because," Matt said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'm the new chief executive officer of Morrison and Associates. The board hired me last month to restructure operations and improve employee relations. One of the first things I requested was a review of recent terminations." Julie stared at him, her mind struggling to process the information. "You're what?" "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wasn't sure how to explain without sounding like I was trying to impress you, or somehow repay you for your kindness." Matt's hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders tense. "I wanted you to know me as just Matt, not as someone with a title in an office." "But you were homeless," Julie said weakly. "You and Diane were sleeping on a bench." "Housing mix-up with our corporate apartment," Matt explained. "I was supposed to start work Monday, but the keys weren't ready and the hotel was overbooked because of some convention. We were literally just waiting for morning so I could sort it out." Julie felt like she was floating outside her own body, watching this surreal conversation from a distance. "So when I invited you home, you saved us from a very cold, very miserable night," Matt said simply. "You had no idea who I was or what I could do for you. You just saw people who needed help, and you helped us. That means everything to me, Julie, everything." Diane, who had been listening with the serious attention children bring to adult conversations that clearly matter, reached up and took Julie's hand. "Are you sad, Julie? Daddy didn't mean to trick you." Julie looked down at the little girl, then up at Matt, then at the imposing building where she had once sat behind a reception desk, feeling invisible and undervalued. The green bracelet on her wrist seemed to catch the afternoon light. "I'm not sad," she said slowly. "I'm just confused. What does this mean? What do you want from me?" "I want to offer you a job," Matt said. "Not as a receptionist, as head of employee wellness and community outreach. It's a new position, part of the company's commitment to treating employees as human beings, not just resources. Your journalism background, your understanding of what it's like to balance work with family responsibilities, your natural empathy, You're exactly what we need." Julie felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Matt, I can't accept a job just because you feel grateful. That's not fair to either of us." "This isn't about gratitude," Matt said firmly. "This is about recognizing talent and character when I see it. I've been looking for someone to fill this position for weeks. After spending one evening with you, seeing how you think about problems, how you treat people, how you handle adversity, I knew I'd found the right person." Julie looked up at the building again, imagining herself walking through those marble corridors, not as a desperate receptionist hoping to keep her job, but as someone with purpose, with the authority to make changes, to help people the way she had always dreamed of helping them. "Can I think about it?" she asked finally. Matt smiled, the first truly relaxed smile she had seen from him all afternoon. "Of course. Take all the time you need." As they walked back toward the cafe, Diane chattering excitedly about how Julie could have a big office with plants and pictures, Julie found herself thinking about kindness and opportunity, about the strange ways life could pivot on a single moment of choosing to care about someone else. She was still unemployed, still worried about her mother, still uncertain about the future, but now she was also something else, wanted, valued, seen not just for what she could do, but for who she was. It was, she thought, a pretty good feeling. Julie spent the weekend in a haze of disbelief, pacing her small apartment and staring at her phone every few minutes, as if Matt's job offer might somehow disappear if she didn't check on it regularly. The green bracelet seemed heavier on her wrist, weighted now with the knowledge of everything that had followed from that snowy night. On Sunday afternoon, she finally called her mother. "I need to tell you something," Julie said without preamble. "Remember those people I helped the other night? The father and daughter?" "Of course, sweetheart. You said the little girl made you a bracelet." "Well, it turns out the father is the new CEO of Morrison & Associates, and he wants to offer me a job. A real job, Mom, not reception work." There was a long pause. "Julie, are you sure this is legitimate? It sounds too good to be true." "I know it sounds crazy, but I met him at the company building. He knew about my termination, knew details about the firm that you couldn't just make up." Julie twisted the wire bracelet around her finger. "He wants me to head up employee wellness and community outreach." "Oh, honey," her mother's voice was soft with emotion. "That sounds perfect for you. You've always wanted to help people." "But what if I'm not qualified? What if he's just offering this because he feels guilty? What if everyone thinks I only got the job because—" Julie trailed off, not wanting to voice her fears about what people might assume about her relationship with Matt. "Julie Elizabeth Harper," her mother said firmly, using the full name that meant she was about to dispense wisdom. "Do you remember what you told me you wanted to be when you grew up?" Julie smiled despite her anxiety, a superhero who fixed problems with words instead of punches. "And what is this job, if not exactly that?" Monday morning, Julie stood outside the Morrison & Associates building at 8:45 a.m., wearing her best interview suit and carrying a folder with copies of her college transcripts, writing samples, and a hastily crafted resume that emphasized her communication skills and volunteer work. Her palms were sweating despite the cool spring air. The lobby was bustling with employees heading to elevators, their confident strides and expensive suits making Julie feel conspicuous in her 3-year-old blazer. She approached the security desk, her voice barely steady. "I'm here to see Matthew Chen. I'm Julie Harper." The guard consulted his computer and smiled. "Ah, yes, Mr. Chen is expecting you. Take elevator bank C to the 30th floor. His assistant will meet you there." 30th floor. Not the 15th where she had once worked, but the executive level. Julie's stomach churned as the elevator climbed, numbers flashing by with increasing speed. The doors opened onto a reception area that was nothing like the modest front desk where she had once sat. This was clearly the domain of serious decision-makers. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern art on the walls, furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. "Miss Harper?" A woman in her 40s approached, extending her hand. "I'm Patricia Wells, Mr. Chen's assistant. He's finishing up a call, but he'll see you in just a moment." Julie nodded, not trusting her voice. Patricia led her to a small conference room with a view of the harbor, offering coffee or water. Julie declined both, afraid her hands would shake too much to hold a cup steady. When Matt entered 5 minutes later, he looked completely different from the man who had fixed her cabinet hinges. He wore a charcoal suit that was clearly expensive, his hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making important decisions. For a moment, Julie felt like she was meeting a stranger. But then he smiled, and she saw the same kindness in his eyes that had drawn her to help him that snowy night. "Julie, thank you for coming. I know this whole situation is unconventional." "That's putting it mildly." Julie managed a weak smile. "I still feel like I'm dreaming." Matt sat across from her at the small conference table. "I want to be completely transparent about everything. This position is real. It was approved by the board before I ever met you. The company has been struggling with employee satisfaction and retention. We need someone who understands what it's like to work here from the ground up." He slid a folder across the table. "This is the job description, salary range, and benefits package. I want you to review everything carefully and ask any questions you have." Julie opened the folder, and her eyes widened. The salary was nearly double what she had been making as a receptionist. The benefits included full health coverage, which would help enormously with her mother's medical expenses, and a continuing education allowance. "The position reports directly to me," Matt continued, "but you'd have significant autonomy to develop programs and policies. You'd also have a budget for community outreach initiatives." Julie looked up from the papers. "Matt, I have to ask, would you have offered this job to someone else if we hadn't met that night?" Matt considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I might have offered it to someone with more traditional corporate experience, someone with an MBA and a track record in human resources." He leaned forward slightly. "But I think that would have been a mistake. This job isn't about managing policies and procedures. It's about understanding people, recognizing when they're struggling, knowing how to help. You demonstrated all of those qualities the night we met." "But people will talk," Julie said quietly. "They'll assume I got this job because we're involved somehow." "Are we?" Matt asked gently. "Involved, I mean?" Julie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I don't know. Are we?" Matt was quiet for a moment. "I'd like to be. I think about you constantly, Julie. About your kindness, your strength, the way you made Diane laugh. But I also want you to know that this job offer isn't contingent on your answer to that question. If you want the position, but don't want to explore a personal relationship, that's completely fine." Julie studied his face, looking for any sign of manipulation or pressure. She found only honesty, and maybe a hint of vulnerability that reminded her of the man who had quietly fixed her broken things. "I'd like to explore both," she said finally, "the job and us, but I need to know that I earned this position." "You did," Matt said without hesitation. "Your compassion, your communication skills, your understanding of what employees need. Those aren't things you can teach in business school. You have them naturally." Julie took a deep breath and extended her hand across the table. "Then I accept. When do I start?" Matt smiled as he shook her hand. "How about tomorrow? I'll have Patricia show you to your office and introduce you to the team." As they stood to leave, Julie caught sight of herself in the conference room's window reflection. She looked the same as she had an hour ago, but something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer Julie Harper, former receptionist, struggling caregiver, woman whose dreams had been derailed by circumstance. She was Julie Harper, head of employee wellness and community outreach at Morrison & Associates. Someone with the power to make changes, to help people, to use her voice and her compassion to solve problems. It was exactly what she had always wanted to be, even if she had never imagined it would look like this. That evening, she called her mother to share the news, then sat at her small dining table and carefully moved Diane's drawing from the refrigerator to a frame. Tomorrow, it would hang in her new office, a reminder of the moment when kindness had changed everything. The green bracelet caught the light as she adjusted the frame, and Julie smiled. Some gifts, she realized, kept giving long after they were received. Julie's first week at Morrison & Associates passed in a blur of introductions, orientation sessions, and the surreal experience of having her own office. It was a corner space on the 28th floor, with windows facing both the harbor and the city center. Patricia had helped her arrange the furniture and hang Diane's drawing next to her journalism degree, creating a small gallery that told the story of dreams deferred and then unexpectedly fulfilled. The work itself was energizing in a way Julie hadn't experienced since her college internship at the campus newspaper. She spent her days reviewing employee satisfaction surveys, researching best practices for work-life balance programs, and developing proposals for community partnerships. For the first time in years, she fell asleep thinking about projects she was excited to tackle the next day rather than problems she was dreading. But by Thursday, she began to notice the whispers. It started with sideways glances in the elevator, conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered a room, and the way some colleagues seemed to find excuses to avoid working with her directly. Julie tried to ignore it, focusing on her work and telling herself she was imagining things. But during lunch on Friday, while waiting in line at the cafeteria, she overheard a conversation that made her stomach drop. "I'm just saying, it's suspicious," a woman was saying to her companion, both of them dressed in the sleek business attire of the legal department. Brand new CEO shows up, and suddenly, some random receptionist gets promoted to a position that didn't exist 2 weeks ago? "Maybe she's qualified," the other woman replied, though her tone suggested she doubted it. "Come on, Rebecca. She has a journalism degree from a state school and 2 years of front desk experience." Meanwhile, Sarah Chen in HR has been waiting for a promotion for 3 years and has an MBA from Wharton. Julie felt heat rise in her cheeks. She moved to a different line, but the conversation followed her. "Plus, I heard she was fired right before Chen started. What kind of coincidence is that? You think they knew each other before? All I'm saying is that good-looking single CEOs don't usually pluck struggling receptionists from obscurity unless there's something else going on." Julie abandoned her lunch plans and retreated to her office, closing the door and leaning against it as her heart pounded. She had known this would happen, had anticipated the speculation and gossip, but hearing it articulated so bluntly made it real in a way that preparation couldn't soften. She tried to focus on work, but the overheard conversation replayed in her mind on an endless loop. By 5 o'clock, she was questioning everything: her qualifications, her decision to take the job, her judgment about Matt's motivations. Her phone buzzed with a text from Matt. "How was your first week? Dinner tomorrow to celebrate." She stared at the message for several minutes before typing back, "Can we talk? Something's come up." His response was immediate. "Of course. My office in 10 minutes?" Julie took the elevator to the 30th floor, her reflection in the polished doors showing a woman who looked professional and confident, despite feeling anything but. Patricia had already left for the day, so Julie knocked directly on Matt's office door. "Come in," his voice called. Matt's office was even more impressive than the conference room where they had met, a corner suite with a view that encompassed half the city. He was standing by the windows, tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, but he turned immediately when she entered. "What's wrong?" he asked, and the genuine concern in his voice almost made her cry. "People are talking," Julie said without preamble. "About us, about how I got this job. They think I'm sleeping with you." Matt's expression darkened. "Who said that?" "It doesn't matter who. What matters is that it's affecting my credibility. People don't think I earned this position." Julie sat down heavily in one of the chairs facing his desk. "Maybe they're right." "They're not right," Matt said firmly, moving to sit across from her rather than behind his desk. "Julie, you've accomplished more in 1 week than some people do in months. The proposal you submitted for the employee mentorship program was brilliant. The research you did on flexible work arrangements was exactly what the board needed to see. But none of that matters if people think I only got the job because of personal reasons." Julie twisted the green bracelet around her wrist. "I can't build programs to help employees if they don't respect me." Matt was quiet for a moment, his jaw working in the way she had learned meant he was thinking carefully about his words. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know. I love this job, Matt. I love the work. I love feeling like I can make a difference. But I can't be effective if people don't trust my judgment or my motives." "Would it help if we kept our personal relationship private for a while?" Matt asked gently. "Let you establish yourself professionally before people know we're seeing each other?" Julie looked at him sharply. "Are we seeing each other?" "We've had coffee and one dinner. I don't even know what this is." Matt leaned forward, his eyes serious. "I know what I want it to be. I want to take you on real dates, meet your mother, let Diane get attached to you the way she clearly wants to. I want to fall asleep thinking about you and wake up planning things we can do together." He paused. "But I also want you to succeed in this job, and I don't want to be the reason you don't." Julie felt tears prick at her eyes. "This is impossible. If we keep our distance, I'm miserable and wondering what might have been." If we don't, I'm dealing with gossip and questions about my professional integrity. There's a third option, Matt said quietly, which is, you prove them wrong. You do such exceptional work, show such clear competence and dedication, that no one can question whether you deserve to be here. Let your results speak louder than their whispers. Julie wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And what happens to us while I'm proving myself? Matt reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand, his thumb tracing gently over her knuckles. We take it slow. We're careful about how we present ourselves at work. We let whatever this is between us develop naturally, away from office politics and corporate gossip. That could take months, Julie said. Good things usually do, Matt replied. Julie, I've waited 34 years to meet someone like you. I can wait a little longer to do this right. Julie squeezed his hand, drawing strength from the contact. Okay, but I have conditions. Name them. No special treatment at work. No easier assignments or protection from criticism. If I mess up, you have to call me on it just like you would anyone else. Agreed. And no more expensive gifts or gestures that people might notice. I know you have money, but I need to earn respect based on my work, not on whatever jewelry or flowers might show up at my desk. Matt smiled. The only gift I've given you was made by my 5-year-old daughter out of craft supplies. Julie looked down at the green bracelet, its wire worn smooth from constant wearing. This is all I need. And what about outside of work? Matt asked. Can I still take you to dinner? Can Diane still ask when she's going to see Julie again? Julie felt the tight knot in her chest begin to loosen. Yes, to dinner. And tell Diane that I miss her too. As she rode the elevator back down to the 28th floor to collect her things, Julie made a mental list of everything she needed to accomplish in the coming weeks. She would research every best practice, read every case study, develop the most comprehensive employee wellness program Morrison & Associates had ever seen. She would earn her place here through competence and hard work, one project at a time. The whispers might continue, but eventually they would be drowned out by results. That night, as she prepared for bed, Julie looked at Diane's drawing on her nightstand. 3 stick figures holding hands, all of them smiling. It was a picture of possibility, of hope, of a future that might be more complicated than the little girl had imagined but was still worth fighting for. Julie touched the green bracelet one more time before turning off the light. Tomorrow, she would begin the work of proving she belonged exactly where she was. 3 weeks into her new role, Julie was finally finding her rhythm. Her employee wellness survey had garnered a 93% response rate, higher than any previous company survey, and her preliminary recommendations were scheduled for presentation to the board next month. She had developed partnerships with 3 local nonprofits and launched a pilot program for flexible work arrangements that already had a waiting list of interested departments. The whispers hadn't stopped entirely, but they had quieted as her competence became undeniable. Julie found herself walking taller in the hallways, speaking up more confidently in meetings, and actually looking forward to the challenges each day brought. That sense of growing confidence made the phone call even more devastating. Julie was reviewing applications for the Employee Assistance Program when her phone rang on Thursday afternoon. The caller ID showed her mother's assisted living facility. Ms. Harper, this is Nancy Chen from Willowbrook. I'm calling about your mother. Julie's blood went cold. What's wrong? She's had a cardiac episode. The paramedics are transporting her to St. Mary's Hospital right now. She's conscious and stable, but you should come as soon as possible. Julie's hands were shaking as she hung up the phone. A heart attack. Her mother, who had already fought diabetes for 8 years, who had grown frailer each month despite her stubborn optimism, was now fighting for her life in an ambulance. She grabbed her purse and coat, her movements mechanical and urgent. She had to get to the hospital, had to be there when her mother arrived, had to… Julie? Matt appeared in her doorway, his expression immediately shifting from casual to concerned when he saw her face. What happened? My mom. Heart attack, I have to go. Her voice sounded strange, like it was coming from very far away. I'll drive you, Matt said immediately. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I mean, thank you, but I can't. Not here, not with people watching. Matt's face showed a flash of hurt before he controlled it. Julie, this isn't about office politics. This is about your mother. Everything is about office politics now, Julie said, tears starting to blur her vision. Don't you understand? If you leave with me, if people see you driving me to the hospital, it confirms everything they've been saying about why I got this job. I don't care what they say. Well, I do. The words exploded out of her with more force than she expected. I care because I have to work with these people every day. I care because my credibility is the only thing that makes me effective in this job. I care because... Her voice broke, and she pressed her hand to her mouth. Matt stepped into her office and closed the door behind him. Because what? Because I'm terrified, Julie whispered. I'm terrified that they're right. That I don't deserve this job. That I'm just some charity case you felt sorry for. And if my mom dies and you're the one who comforts me, then I'll never know if what's between us is real or just more pity. Matt was quiet for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. When he spoke, his voice was carefully controlled. Is that really what you think? That everything I've said, everything we've shared, is just pity? Julie wiped her eyes with her sleeve. I don't know what to think anymore. I just know I have to get to the hospital, and I have to do it alone. Fine, Matt said quietly. But Julie, when you're ready to stop punishing yourself for accepting help, when you're ready to believe that you deserve good things, including this job, and including whatever this is between us, I'll be here. He turned and left, and Julie felt the absence like a physical ache. But there was no time to process it. She gathered her things and headed for the elevator, praying she would make it to the hospital before it was too late. The drive to St. Mary's was a blur of traffic lights and stop signs that seemed designed to keep her from her destination. Julie's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles were white, and she found herself making bargains with God, with the universe, with anyone who might be listening. Let her be okay. Let me have more time. I'll be a better daughter, I'll visit more, I'll stop complaining about the sacrifices I've made. She parked in the emergency room lot and ran through the automatic doors, her heels clicking against the polished floor. The smell hit her immediately, antiseptic and fear, the particular combination that belonged only to hospitals. My mother, Elena Harper, she said breathlessly to the registration clerk. She was brought in by ambulance, cardiac episode. The clerk typed efficiently, her face professionally sympathetic. She's in the cardiac unit, room 314. Take the elevators to the 3rd floor. Julie's legs felt unsteady as she rode the elevator up, watching the numbers change with agonizing slowness. When the doors finally opened, she hurried down the hallway, reading room numbers until she found 314. Her mother looked impossibly small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped and hummed with electronic vigilance. Her face was pale but peaceful, her silver hair spread across the pillow like she was simply taking an afternoon nap. But the oxygen cannula in her nose and the IV line in her arm told a different story. Mom? Julie whispered, approaching the bed carefully. Elena's eyes fluttered open and she smiled weakly. There's my girl. Julie pulled a chair close to the bed and took her mother's hand, careful not to disturb the IV. How are you feeling? Like I've been run over by a truck, Elena said with a faint laugh that turned into a cough. But the doctor says I'm stubborn enough to pull through. Of course you are. You're the strongest person I know. Elena squeezed Julie's hand with what little strength she had. Tell me about work. Are you happy there? Julie felt tears threaten again. Even lying in a hospital bed, her mother was more concerned about Julie's well-being than her own. Work is good, Mom. Really good. I'm helping people, making changes that matter. And the young man, Matt, how is he? Julie hesitated. He's complicated. Elena studied her daughter's face with a keen perception that illness seemed to sharpen rather than dull. What happened? Nothing happened. That's the problem. Julie found herself telling her mother everything. About the job offer, the workplace gossip, her fears about deserving the position, the way she had pushed Matt away when she needed him most. Elena listened without interruption, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of understanding. When Julie finished, her mother was quiet for several minutes. Do you remember, Elena said finally, when you were 7 and you won that essay contest at school? Julie frowned, not seeing the connection. The one about community helpers? You came home crying because Tommy Martinez said you only won because your teacher felt sorry for you since your father had just died. Elena's voice was soft but firm. Do you remember what I told you? You said that good things can come from sad things, but that doesn't make the good things less real or less deserved. Exactly. Elena shifted slightly in the bed, wincing. Sweetheart, the circumstances that led to you helping Matt and Diane don't diminish the kindness of what you did. And the fact that your kindness led to opportunity doesn't make you less qualified for that opportunity. But what if? What if you spent less time questioning whether you deserve happiness and more time actually being happy? Elena interrupted gently. Julie, I've watched you sacrifice your dreams, your youth, your own needs to take care of me. I felt guilty about it every single day. And now, when life finally offers you something beautiful, meaningful work, and a good man who cares about you, you want to refuse it because you're afraid it's too good to be true? Julie felt the tears she had been holding back finally spill over. I'm scared, Mom. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not as good at this job as I think I am? What if Matt decides I'm too much trouble? Then you'll figure it out, Elena said simply. But you can't protect yourself from disappointment by refusing to try. And you can't earn love by being perfect. You earn it by being honest, by being brave enough to let people see who you really are. A soft knock on the door interrupted them. Julie looked up to see a familiar small figure peeking around the doorframe. Julie? Diane's voice was tentative. Daddy said you were sad. Behind her, Matt appeared, carrying a small bouquet of flowers and looking uncertain. I'm sorry to intrude. Diane insisted on coming when I told her about your mother. We can leave if you prefer. Julie looked at her mother, who was smiling for the first time since Julie had arrived. Are you going to introduce me to your friends? Elena asked. Julie stood up, her heart full of too many emotions to name. Mom, this is Matt and Diane. This is my mother, Elena. Diane approached the bed with the fearless curiosity of childhood. Are you sick? Julie was crying in the car. I was a little sick, Elena said gently, but I'm feeling better now that Julie's here. Matt stepped forward, his expression cautious but hopeful. Mrs. Harper, I'm sorry to meet you under these circumstances. Julie talks about you constantly. All good things, I hope, Elena said, and Julie could hear the assessment in her mother's voice, the way she was taking Matt's measure. The best things, Matt assured her. She's very proud of you. For the next hour, they sat together in the small hospital room. Diane colored pictures on napkins from the cafeteria, chattering to Elena about school and her stuffed rabbit and how Julie made the best soup in the world. Matt spoke quietly with Elena about her treatment plan, asking informed questions that revealed he had done research on cardiac care during the drive to the hospital. Julie watched it all with a growing sense of rightness, of pieces clicking into place. This was what family looked like. Not just blood relations, but people who showed up when things got difficult, who brought flowers to strangers and crayons to brighten sterile rooms. As visiting hours drew to a close, Elena squeezed Julie's hand. Walk me to the elevator, she said to Matt and Diane, giving Julie a meaningful look. When they were alone, Elena turned to her daughter. He's a good one, Julie, and that little girl adores you. I know, Julie said. I was just so scared of messing it up that I almost did. It's not too late to fix it, Elena said, but you have to decide what you want more, safety or happiness. Julie kissed her mother's forehead. I'll see you tomorrow, okay? Get some rest. In the hallway, Matt was helping Diane put her coat on, his movements gentle and patient. When he saw Julie, his expression was carefully neutral. Thank you for coming, Julie said. Both of you. It meant a lot to my mom. As they stood to leave, Julie caught sight of herself in the conference room's window reflection. She looked the same as she had an hour ago, but something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer Julie Harper, former receptionist, struggling caregiver, woman whose dreams had been derailed by circumstance. She was Julie Harper, head of employee wellness and community outreach at Morrison & Associates. Someone with the power to make changes, to help people, to use her voice and her compassion to solve problems. It was exactly what she had always wanted to be, even if she had never imagined it would look like this. That evening, she called her mother to share the news, then sat at her small dining table and carefully moved Diane's drawing from the refrigerator to a frame. Tomorrow, it would hang in her new office, a reminder of the moment when kindness had changed everything. The green bracelet caught the light as she adjusted the frame, and Julie smiled. Some gifts, she realized, kept giving long after they were received. Julie's first week at Morrison & Associates passed in a blur of introductions, orientation sessions, and the surreal experience of having her own office. It was a corner space on the 28th floor, with windows facing both the harbor and the city center. Patricia had helped her arrange the furniture and hang Diane's drawing next to her journalism degree, creating a small gallery that told the story of dreams deferred and then unexpectedly fulfilled. The work itself was energizing in a way Julie hadn't experienced since her college internship at the campus newspaper. She spent her days reviewing employee satisfaction surveys, researching best practices for work-life balance programs, and developing proposals for community partnerships. For the first time in years, she fell asleep thinking about projects she was excited to tackle the next day rather than problems she was dreading. But by Thursday, she began to notice the whispers. It started with sideways glances in the elevator, conversations that stopped abruptly when she entered a room, and the way some colleagues seemed to find excuses to avoid working with her directly. Julie tried to ignore it, focusing on her work and telling herself she was imagining things. But during lunch on Friday, while waiting in line at the cafeteria, she overheard a conversation that made her stomach drop. "I'm just saying, it's suspicious," a woman was saying to her companion, both of them dressed in the sleek business attire of the legal department. Brand new CEO shows up, and suddenly, some random receptionist gets promoted to a position that didn't exist 2 weeks ago. "Maybe she's qualified," the other woman replied, though her tone suggested she doubted it. "Come on, Rebecca. She has a journalism degree from a state school and 2 years of front desk experience." Meanwhile, Sarah Chen in HR has been waiting for a promotion for 3 years and has an MBA from Wharton. Julie felt heat rise in her cheeks. She moved to a different line, but the conversation followed her. "Plus, I heard she was fired right before Chen started. What kind of coincidence is that? You think they knew each other before? All I'm saying is that good-looking single CEOs don't usually pluck struggling receptionists from obscurity unless there's something else going on." Julie abandoned her lunch plans and retreated to her office, closing the door and leaning against it as her heart pounded. She had known this would happen, had anticipated the speculation and gossip, but hearing it articulated so bluntly made it real in a way that preparation couldn't soften. "How are you doing?" Matt asked, and the genuine concern in his voice made Julie's chest tighten. "I'm scared," Julie admitted, "about Mom, about work, about us. But I'm tired of letting fear make my decisions." Matt studied her face. "What does that mean?" Julie took a deep breath, thinking about her mother's words, about the choice between safety and happiness. "It means I'd like to have dinner with you tomorrow night. If the offer still stands." Matt's smile was like sunrise after a long night. "The offer stands." As they walked toward the elevator together, Diane slipped her small hand into Julie's. "Is your mommy going to be okay?" "I think so," Julie said, and for the first time in hours, she actually believed it. Outside the hospital, Matt walked Julie to her car. "About earlier, in your office," he began. "I was wrong," Julie interrupted. "Not about needing to prove myself at work. That's still important. But I was wrong to push you away when I needed support. I was wrong to question your motives. And I was wrong to let fear keep me from accepting help from someone who cares about me." Matt reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch gentle. "We all make mistakes when we're scared. The important thing is what we do next." Julie looked up at him, this man who had come to the hospital with flowers and a 5-year-old with crayons, who had researched cardiac care because her mother was sick, who had waited patiently while she figured out what she wanted. "What I want to do next," she said, "is stop being so afraid of good things, starting with this." She reached up and kissed him, right there in the hospital parking lot under the fluorescent lights, not caring who might see or what anyone might think. It was soft and brief and tasted like hope. When they broke apart, Matt rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I was waiting for you to be ready." Julie smiled, feeling lighter than she had in days. "I'm ready now." Julie's mother spent 4 days in the hospital, during which time the cardiac unit became an unlikely gathering place. Julie arrived each morning before work and returned each evening, but she was rarely alone. Matt appeared most afternoons with coffee and updates from the office, careful to maintain appropriate professional distance while still offering quiet support. Diane visited twice, bringing homemade cookies from her after-school program and a steady stream of questions that made Elena laugh despite her oxygen cannula. On Saturday, when the doctors finally cleared Elena to return to Willowbrook, Julie felt a complex mix of relief and gratitude that she was still learning to accept gracefully. "I can drive you back to the facility," she offered as her mother gathered her few belongings. "Actually," Elena said, folding her reading glasses carefully, "I was hoping to see your apartment first. It's been months since I've been there, and I want to see where you hung that picture the little girl made." Julie helped her mother into the passenger seat of her car, noting how much more fragile Elena seemed after 4 days of medical intervention. But her eyes were bright and curious as they drove through the city, commenting on new construction and asking about Julie's work with the same engagement she had always shown in her daughter's life. At the apartment, Elena moved slowly but purposefully, examining the small changes Julie had made since her promotion. Fresh flowers on the kitchen table, a new throw pillow on the couch, Diane's framed drawing hanging next to her journalism degree. "It looks happier," Elena observed, settling carefully onto the sofa. "Less like a waiting room and more like a home." Julie made tea and joined her mother, tucking a quilt around Elena's legs. "I feel happier, different than I have in years. Tell me about the job, the real details, not just the summary you give me over the phone." For the next hour, Julie described her work in detail. The employee survey results that had revealed widespread dissatisfaction with work-life balance, the partnerships she was building with local organizations, the mentorship program that was generating excitement across multiple departments. Elena listened with the focused attention that had made her such an effective high school counselor before her diagnosis. "You sound like yourself again," Elena said when Julie finished. "Like the girl who used to interview the neighbors for her pretend newspaper, who wanted to solve everyone's problems with the right questions." "It doesn't feel like work," Julie admitted. "Even when it's challenging, even when I'm learning things I've never done before, it feels like purpose." "And Matt, how does he feel like?" Julie felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Like possibility, like someone who sees me clearly and likes what he sees, but also like someone I could disappoint if I'm not careful." Elena reached over and touched the green wire bracelet that Julie still wore every day. "This is from his daughter?" "Diane, she made it the first night they stayed here." Julie twisted the bracelet, remembering that snowy evening that had changed everything. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think it's wrong to want more? I have meaningful work now, enough money to help with your care, a man who makes me laugh, and a little girl who draws me pictures. Sometimes I feel guilty for being so happy when other people are struggling." Elena was quiet for a moment, studying her daughter's face. "Julie, do you remember the advice I used to give students who came to me feeling guilty about their successes? That happiness isn't a finite resource. That being happy doesn't take happiness away from anyone else." "Exactly, and there's something else." Elena leaned forward slightly. "The way you describe your work, the way your face lights up when you talk about helping employees or building community partnerships. That's not selfish happiness. That's joy that creates more joy. You're not just accepting good things. You're using them to make things better for other people." A knock at the door interrupted them. Julie opened it to find Matt and Diane, the little girl holding a large wrapped package and practically vibrating with excitement. "We brought something for your mommy," Diane announced without preamble. Elena struggled to stand, but Matt gestured for her to stay seated. "Please, don't get up. We just wanted to drop this off." Diane thrust the package toward Elena. "I made it myself. Well, Daddy helped a little." Elena carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a photo album, clearly handmade, with Julie's family written in crayon across the cover. Inside were pictures, some printed from phones, others clearly taken with a child's camera, documenting the past few weeks. Julie at her desk in her new office, looking confident and professional. Matt and Diane at the hospital, Diane coloring while Matt read medical pamphlets. Julie and Elena laughing during one of their visits. The final page held a drawing similar to the one hanging on Julie's wall, but this one showed 4 figures instead of 3. "See?" Diane pointed to the new addition. "That's Julie's mommy. Now we're all together." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she studied the album. "This is beautiful, sweetheart. Thank you." "Daddy says families don't have to start the same way," Diane continued with the matter-of-fact wisdom of childhood. "Sometimes they just find each other." Julie looked at Matt, who was watching the interaction with an expression of such tenderness that her breath caught. This was what love looked like, she realized. Not just the romantic attraction between adults, but the broader willingness to expand your definition of family, to make room for more people to care about. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" Elena asked. "I know Julie was planning something simple, but I'd love to get to know you both better." Matt glanced at Julie, who nodded. "If you're not too tired, Mom." "I'm exactly the right amount of tired for a family dinner," Elena said firmly. They spent the evening around Julie's small dining table, sharing takeout Chinese food and stories. Diane entertained them with detailed accounts of her kindergarten social dynamics, complete with dramatic reenactments of playground disputes. Matt described his previous job in corporate restructuring, carefully editing out the parts that might reveal the extent of his wealth. Elena shared memories of Julie's childhood journalism phase, when she had insisted on interviewing everyone in their apartment building for a newsletter that reached a circulation of 12. As the evening wound down, Elena announced she was ready to return to Willowbrook. "I want to sleep in my own bed," she said, "and I have bridge club tomorrow morning." While Matt helped Diane pack up her crayons and Julie cleared the dishes, Elena pulled her daughter aside. "I like them," she said simply. "They fit with you." "It's still early, Mom. We're taking things slow." "Sometimes slow is smart," Elena agreed. "But sometimes it's just fear wearing a prettier dress. You'll know the difference when the time comes." Matt drove Elena back to the facility while Julie stayed home with Diane, who had fallen asleep on the couch during a nature documentary. Julie covered the little girl with the quilt her mother had made, studying the peaceful expression on Diane's face. There was something profound about being trusted with someone's sleeping child, about being considered safe enough for this kind of vulnerability. When Matt returned an hour later, he found Julie reading on the couch, Diane still sleeping with her head on Julie's lap. "She's out cold," he said softly, settling into the chair across from them. "She had a big day. Thank you for the photo album. That was incredibly thoughtful." "That was all Diane's idea. She's been working on it for weeks, apparently." Matt smiled. "She asked me last week if you were going to be her new mom." Julie's hand stilled on the page she was reading. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that sometimes good things take time, but when they're meant to happen, they do." Julie looked up from her book, meeting his eyes across the small space. "And what do you think about good things and timing?" Matt was quiet for a moment, his gaze moving from Julie to his sleeping daughter and back again. "I think I've never been happier than I am right now, sitting in your living room watching you read while my daughter sleeps on your lap. I think if this is what the rest of my life could look like, I'd be the luckiest man in the world." Julie felt her heart skip. "Matt." "I know it's early," he said quickly. "I know we agreed to take things slow, but I also know that I love you, Julie. I love your compassion and your strength and the way you make Diane laugh. I love how dedicated you are to your work and how much you care about your mother. I love that you still wear a bracelet made of craft supplies because it reminds you that kindness matters." Julie carefully moved Diane's head to a pillow and stood up, crossing to where Matt sat. She knelt beside his chair and took his hands in hers. "I love you too," she said simply. "I love how you fix things without being asked, how you show up when people need you, how you've made space in your life for my mother and my fears and my stubborn independence. I love that you see potential in me that I'm only just learning to see in myself." Matt cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing across her cheekbones. "So what do we do now?" Julie smiled, thinking about her mother's words about fear wearing prettier dresses, about happiness not being a finite resource, about families finding each other in unexpected ways. "Now we stop being so careful about protecting ourselves from good things," she said. "We see what happens when we actually trust that we deserve to be happy." Matt kissed her then, soft and sure, and Julie felt something settle into place in her chest. This was what courage felt like, not the absence of fear but the decision to choose hope anyway. When they broke apart, Diane stirred on the couch, blinking sleepily. "Are we going home now?" she asked. Julie and Matt looked at each other, and Julie saw her own realization reflected in his eyes. Home wasn't a place anymore. It was this, the three of them together, building something real and lasting from the simple decision to be kind to strangers on a snowy night. "Yes," Matt said, gathering his daughter into his arms. "We're going home." But as they prepared to leave, Julie realized that home was expanding, becoming less about location and more about the people who chose to show up for each other. Home was her mother's sharp wit and Elena's photo album wisdom. Home was meaningful work and the green bracelet and the sound of Diane's laughter filling empty spaces. Home was learning to accept love without apologizing for needing it. 6 weeks later, Julie stood in the conference room on the 30th floor, watching board members file in for her formal presentation on the employee wellness program. Her hands were steady as she arranged her notes, a far cry from the nervous woman who had sat in this same room accepting a job offer that had seemed too good to be true. The presentation went better than she had dared hope. The board asked thoughtful questions about implementation timelines and budget allocations, treating her recommendations with the respect of colleagues rather than the polite skepticism she had feared. When she finished, the applause was genuine, and several members approached her afterward to discuss specific aspects of the program. "Excellent work, Ms. Harper," said Patricia Coleman, the board chair and one of the city's most respected business leaders. "This is exactly the kind of innovative thinking Morrison & Associates needs." As the room emptied, Matt remained behind, his expression carefully professional but his eyes warm with pride. "That was impressive," he said once they were alone. "The mentorship program proposal especially, that's going to make a real difference." Julie felt a familiar flutter of happiness at his approval, but it was different now than it had been in those early weeks. She no longer needed his validation to feel confident in her abilities. She simply enjoyed sharing her successes with someone who understood their significance. "Thank you. And thank you for letting me present without any introduction about our relationship. I know some of the board members have figured it out, but I wanted them to evaluate the work on its own merits." Matt smiled. "I think you've proven yourself beyond any reasonable doubt. The quarterly employee satisfaction scores came in yesterday, highest in company history." They walked together toward the elevators, maintaining the professional distance they had agreed upon months ago. But in the elevator, alone for 30 seconds between floors, Matt reached over and squeezed her hand. "Dinner tonight? Diane's been asking about Julie all week." "My place or yours?" Julie asked, then laughed at how domestic the question sounded. "Mine. Diane wants to show you her reading progress, and I thought we could try that new recipe she found." The elevator dinged at Julie's floor. As the doors opened, Matt said quietly, "I'm proud of you. What you've accomplished here, what you've built, it's remarkable." Julie stepped out, then turned back. "We've built it, all of us together." That evening, Julie drove to Matt's house for the first time in weeks. He had been careful about inviting her over, aware that his upscale neighborhood and clearly expensive home might trigger her old insecurities about wealth and worthiness. But as spring had softened into early summer, as Julie's confidence had grown and their relationship had deepened, such concerns had gradually faded. The house was beautiful but not ostentatious, a craftsman-style home with a large front porch and mature trees that suggested permanence and comfort rather than luxury. Diane met Julie at the door with a book in her hands and excitement radiating from every small limb. "Julie, I can read chapter books now. Listen." She launched immediately into a passage about a girl who befriended a dragon, her voice careful and proud as she sounded out the more difficult words. "That's amazing, sweetheart," Julie said, settling onto the living room couch beside the little girl. "You've gotten so much better since the last time you read to me." Matt appeared from the kitchen, wearing an apron that read, "World's Okayest Cook," and carrying a wooden spoon. "She's been practicing every day. I think she wants to impress you." "I'm very impressed," Julie assured Diane, who beamed and immediately began reading another passage. They cooked dinner together. Or, rather, Matt and Julie cooked while Diane provided commentary and occasionally helped measure ingredients. The kitchen was warm and filled with the scent of garlic and herbs, and Julie found herself thinking how natural this felt, how much like the family dinners she had imagined but never quite believed she would have. After dinner, while Diane played in the backyard and they cleaned up, Matt said, "I've been thinking about something." "That sounds ominous," Julie teased, drying a plate. "Nothing ominous. More like planning." He paused in his scrubbing of the pasta pot. "Julie, I know we've been taking things slow, and I respect all the reasons why that was important. But I also know how I feel about you, about us, about the future I want." Julie set down the dish towel and turned to face him fully. "What are you saying?" Matt dried his hands and reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Julie's breath caught. "I'm saying that I love you in a way that makes me want to promise you everything," he said, his voice steady but his eyes vulnerable. "I love how you've transformed your job into something meaningful, how you've embraced being part of Diane's life, how you've taught me that kindness isn't weakness, it's the strongest thing a person can choose." He opened the box to reveal a ring that was nothing like what Julie might have expected. Instead of a traditional diamond, it held a small emerald surrounded by delicate gold wire that echoed the design of Diane's original bracelet. "I had it made," Matt explained. "The jeweler used the same kind of wire Diane used, just refined and shaped properly. I wanted something that honored where we started." Julie touched the green bracelet on her wrist, tears blurring her vision. "Matt, I'm not asking you to answer tonight," he said quickly. "I know there are practical things to consider, your mother, our work situation, what this means for Diane, but I wanted you to know that I'm ready for all of it, the beautiful parts and the complicated parts, and everything in between." Through the kitchen window, they could see Diane building something elaborate with sticks and leaves in the backyard, her tongue poking out in concentration. Julie thought about all the ways their lives had intertwined since that snowy night. Professional collaboration, family dinners, quiet mornings when Diane crawled into bed between them to read stories, evenings spent at Willowbrook, where Elena had become as much a grandmother to Diane as she was a mother to Julie. "Can I see the ring?" Julie asked. Matt handed her the box with hands that trembled slightly. Julie slipped the ring onto her finger, surprised by how perfectly it fit, how right it looked next to the wire bracelet that had started everything. "Yes," she said simply. Matt blinked. "Yes? Yes, I want to marry you. Yes, I want to build a real family with you and Diane. Yes, I'm ready to stop being afraid of good things and start trusting that I deserve them." Matt's smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms, spinning her around the kitchen while she laughed. Outside, Diane looked up from her project and waved, as if she had been expecting this exact moment. "There's one more thing," Matt said as he set Julie down. "I talked to the board about our relationship becoming public. They're completely supportive. Your work speaks for itself, and they're impressed by how you've handled the transition." Julie felt a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged lift from her shoulders. "Really? Really? Which means we can stop sneaking around like teenagers. We can go on real dates, hold hands in the lobby, let people see that we're building something together." That night, after Diane had gone to bed with promises of helping plan a wedding, Julie and Matt sat on his front porch swing, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. The engagement ring caught the light from the porch lamp, and Julie found herself thinking about circular journeys, how she had started as someone who gave everything to others and ended up as someone who could accept love in return. "What are you thinking about?" Matt asked softly. "Time," Julie said. "How 6 months ago I thought my life was falling apart, and now I can't imagine being happier. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if it hadn't snowed that day? If you hadn't seen us on that bench?" Julie considered this. "I think we would have found each other eventually. Maybe not the same way, but I think some things are meant to happen." "Meant to be?" "Meant to be chosen," Julie corrected. "The universe gave us the opportunity, but we had to choose to be kind, to be open, to take risks on each other." Matt pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "I'm glad we chose well." Julie smiled, twisting both rings on her finger, the engagement ring that promised their future, and the wire bracelet that remembered their beginning. Tomorrow she would call her mother with the news. Tomorrow she would start planning a wedding, and thinking about honeymoon destinations, and discussing whether Diane wanted to call her Julie or something more maternal. But tonight she was content to sit on a porch swing with the man she loved, listening to the sound of spring rain beginning to fall, and marveling at how much joy could grow from such a simple choice to help someone in need. Some love stories began with passion or grand gestures or dramatic declarations. Theirs had begun with soup and a broken cabinet door and a little girl's homemade bracelet. It was, Julie thought, exactly the kind of love story she would want to tell, one that proved kindness was never wasted, that good things could come from difficult times, and that sometimes the most profound changes began with the decision to simply see someone who needed help and choose to provide it. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How did the presentation go? I'm proud of you no matter what." Julie smiled and typed back, "It went perfectly, and I have some news to share tomorrow." The response came quickly. "Good news, I hope?" "The best news," Julie replied. "Love you, Mom." As she put the phone away, Matt squeezed her closer. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Julie said, and for the first time in her life, she meant it completely. 1 year later, the lakeside pavilion was draped in simple white fabric that moved gently in the spring breeze, creating an atmosphere of understated elegance. Julie stood at the altar in ivory silk, her cap sleeves showing off the green wire bracelet she had never removed, now nestled beside her engagement ring. "You may kiss the bride," Pastor Miguel announced, and when Matt's lips met hers, applause erupted from their intimate gathering of 30 loved ones. Diane launched herself at both of them for a group hug that nearly knocked them over, her flower girl dressed the same pale green as Julie's bracelet. "We're really a family now," she announced to everyone within hearing distance. During the reception, as the sun painted the lake in shades of pink and gold, Julie found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Her employee wellness programs at Morrison & Associates had become a model for other companies. Her mother's health had stabilized, aided by better medical care that Julie's salary had made possible. Most importantly, she had learned to accept love without apologizing for needing it. "Mrs. Chen," Matt said softly, testing out her new name as they swayed to their first dance. "I like the sound of that," Julie replied, looking around at their gathered friends and family. Her co-workers who had become allies, Elena dancing with Matt's brother, Diane collecting flower petals with single-minded determination. Later, as they prepared for bed in their shared home, Julie caught sight of herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked different than she had 18 months ago, not just because of the wedding makeup, but because of something deeper. There was confidence in her posture, joy in her expression, and peace in her eyes that spoke of someone who had finally learned her own worth. "Any regrets, Mrs. Chen?" Matt asked, wrapping his arms around her waist. Julie leaned back against him, thinking about the question seriously. Did she regret the years of struggle, the sacrifices, the circuitous path that had led her here? "No," she said finally, "not a single one. Every difficult thing led me to this moment, to this family, to this life." They checked on Diane, who slept surrounded by art supplies. On her bedside table sat a new creation, another wire bracelet, this one blue, with a note attached. "For someone who needs a friend tomorrow." Julie smiled, understanding that kindness was already becoming a family tradition, passed down through example rather than genetics. As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, Julie touched the green bracelet one more time. It remained a reminder that the most extraordinary transformations often began with the simplest acts of human decency, and that choosing compassion over self-protection could change everything. She was exactly who she had always been meant to be. It had just taken a snowy night, a homeless father and daughter, and a little girl's gift of wire and beads to help her remember that kindness, once given, had the power to transform not just the receiver, but the giver as well. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.